Welcome to Season 2 of The Strain Podcast, a Southgate Media Group production, where we talk all about Guillermo del Toro's horror fantasy series, The Strain. We are currently covering the series' second season on FX. I'm your host, Blaire Knight Graves, Director of Social Media and Associate Editor at TVBinges.com, and with me today is Kyle Tremblay, the Editor-in-Chief at TVBinges.com. You can find us on Twitter at @BlaireLovesTV and at KyleLovesTV, and you can also follow this podcast Twitter handle at @TheStrainPod. Hey Kyle, how you doing today?
Blaire, it is a special day on the Strain podcast for us.
It is quite the special day. The people have spoken.
First of all, that special day is Saturday when we're recording this, before the Strain actually airs.
Bum, bum, bum!
This is a real twist, a real switch 'em up we're going on right here.
Our lovely listeners went ahead and voted. We got 10 tweets, if you recall from last week's episode of the Strain podcast, that we should do a fan fiction section of an episode.
Okay, so the conclusion I've come to is that our listeners are monsters.
Yes, they are the Strigoi.
They are the Strigoi. They do not wish for the well-being of ourselves or of them, because they have to listen to this now. Presumably. Yes. I assume that if you voted for this episode, then you're going to at least do us the honor of listening to it, so you experience the torture with us. But yeah, so we are... Blaire and I are now committed, based on the the Geneva Podcasting Convention, to doing a fan fiction episode, and so that is what is going to happen now. But it is still a normal episode of The Strain. At some point, we will time jump forward to our normal episode and talk about it as we normally do.
The episode that we will be discussing and the episode that we are creating our fan fiction for is Season 2, Episode 11, Dead End, which was written by Carlton Cuse and Regina Corrado. Carlton Cuse is the series showrunner, who's known for being one of the showrunners, I believe, of Lost, and Regina Corrado most recently penned The Battle of Red Hook, which was an episode that Kyle and I both felt kind of fell flat by the end. So we don't know what's going to happen in this week's episode, but I'm a little concerned.
Blaire, I think we do know, because we have prepared fan fiction about it.
Well, yes.
So as of the recording, I know what's going to happen. Now, I reserve the right to change that once I actually watch the episode, but we will see.
So what Kyle and I have both decided to go in totally different with our fan fiction. I am going to improv it for all of you, so enjoy. It's midnight on Saturday night, so I'm nice and loopy.
You have a few drinks in you, let's be honest.
Yes. I've got a little bit of bourbon in me because that's my favorite drink. So Kyle is going to prompt me by asking me about certain characters, and I'm going to guess what happens in this episode based on what happened in last week's episode. One of the reasons I did not decide to write my own fan fiction was because I am so closely attached to the books that I was afraid that I would just start writing about how I wish it became the books. And Kyle has prepared a...
we'll get to my fan fiction.
Yeah. Right.
But we need to play this improv game with you, because I'm excited about what you'll come up with.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a character, and you are going to improvise some fan fiction about that character based on the current point we're at in the series.
Okay.
So I want to start with the curveball, characters that we haven't seen that much in recent weeks, but I'm very curious what they're up to. Tell me what Gus and Angel are doing nowadays.
All right. Gus and Angel are going to abandon the Indian family because that's a boring plotline.
I'm going to miss the daughter, I have to tell you.
I do. She's kind of a good actress. I don't know her name, but she's doing well. It's good.
Parveen is her first name, I know.
Parveen.
Yeah.
So they're going to ditch the Indian family. The Indian family's going to be killed immediately, and Gus is going to fall to his knees, and the rain will be falling on his face, and be like, "No, I will avenge you."
Yep. That checks out.
He and Angel are then going to try to hightail it out of there, and they're going to be confronted by Quinlan. And the three of them are going to go stock up on weapons, and they're going to go find the master, and they're going to kill him.
Oh, in this episode?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought, wow, things are coming to a quick end here.
I really hope so. No, I think, but there's a, let's see. Okay, Angel and Gus, they are going to speak in Spanish at an inopportune time while I'll be tweeting on my phone.
Okay.
And then they're going to go, I think they are going to go get the weapons. They're going to meet with the elder and ancients. They're going to meet with the ancients. Mm-hmm. And they're gonna go team up with Cream. I think that's something that because I just want that guy to come back because I really like him.
Marlo.
I think they're going to be in a big battle. Honestly, like, if I'm just going to, like, straight, like, boring fanfic, I think they're going to be in a really big battle, and I think it's possible that Angel might get his leg broken even further.
Oh, no. It's so much has been made of his broken legs. It's been broken since, like, the 50s, so now it's going to get rebroken.
I know. It's just over and over and over again. That is his fate.
Wow.
He's Sisyphus with that leg.
Sisyphus with a broken leg. Yes. Okay, so if the ultimate destiny of Angel and Gus and company is to kill the Master, then what in the world are F and Nora up to this episode?
They're fighting and bickering again.
Oh, that goes without saying.
Yes. F will have drank an entire bottle of vodka. He's just gonna chug it. He's gonna pull a Ron Swanson in the Tammy episode.
Wow.
Ron versus Tammy's of Parks and Rec. Look at me.
He's gonna get some mashed liquor.
Smash liquor. He's just gonna chug it. He's gonna get a really big fight with Nora. He's gonna slur like his words a lot, and she's gonna tell him that he's a jerk, and she's gonna take Zach and run away with Zach. And when she runs away with Zach, that's when Kelly is gonna find them, and we won't know. There'll be a cliffhanger there. It'll be Zach and Nora with Kelly like standing off at the very end of the episode, wow. Guns a-blazing.
Wow. Okay, so you already answered my Zach. Zach
he'll be whimpering the whole time,
yeah.
Or he'll just be like really sad. He'll have that mean face, that scowl he kind of has.
Yes.
He is going to be sympathetic for a moment, but only when it pertains to the Nora character.
Naturally.
Yes. And then he's going to continue to believe that Kelly is still his mother, despite the fact that he saw her face get smashed and that she's clearly a vampire.
Here's what I'm worried about. I feel like your fanfiction might be too accurate. I feel like...
Should I be absurd? I can be absurd.
No, you can do whatever you want with it, but I feel like we might get to talking about the episode and we'll just replay your fanfiction segment, because this could really happen. Like, this really does seem like what's going on here. But, so tell me, what about Fett? Now, what's he up to?
Fett is going to go crazy trying to find Dutch while Dutch is locked up with Icorst. He's just going to be, like, setting off bombs everywhere, saying... boom, boom, this, and boom, boom, that.
We're now getting into my fanfiction, spoiler alert.
He, I think, is going to believe that Dutch was taken by Palmer, and he's going to go and hold up Palmer, and he's going to take Coco hostage, saying, if you don't give me Dutch, then I am going to kill Coco.
Oh, I wonder how Coco will take to that, now that she has... seemingly conflicted feelings about Palmer, since she knows he's a bad guy now, working with the people who brought on this, or the Strigoi who have brought on this whole thing.
Well, she may comply, but that doesn't mean that Palmer will comply, you know? Like, yes. She might be like, yeah, totally, take me. I am all on your side of getting away from this creepy master vampire dude. And then Palmer is like, no, you are mine, and, like, try to, like, take control of her, and it'll be creepy, just like it's always creepy.
Fair enough. All right, final one. Tell me what happens to Dutch Velders.
Oh God, why are you asking me this?
It's the big one. This is a character that is not in the books, so you genuinely have no idea what she's going to do.
Yeah.
And I need you to look into your crystal ball and foresee the future of the beloved character Dutch Velders.
I think that we are going to be watching a very special episode of Hostel with Dutch Velders. This is me genuinely thinking
This is your fanfiction now.
This is my fanfiction.
We've gone from your predictions into your fanfiction.
Yes, into my fanfiction. It's going to be a very special episode of Hostel. Icorst is going to be a Nazi once again and be like a crazy torturing dude. I'm hoping none of it is sexual whatsoever, because that would be a terrible punishment to that character.
And a bitter irony, if for people who have already watched the episode, that is what happened.
Yes.
They'll be thinking, oh, Blaire, you sad, naive fool.
The thing is, I'm fanficking what I don't want to happen, but like also what I think would be appropriate.
Well, what do you want to happen?
What do I want to happen? I want it to start to be really bad for Dutch, and then like you said this in last week's episode, like Nikki will show up and sacrifice herself to stop Icorst. Like she'll be killed in like the line of fire as like Fett comes in, guns ablazing, or like having some dynamite or something, and Nikki will accidentally be exploded with Icorst. They'll both be gone. I'll be super sad because I love Icorst, but at the same time, if he touches Dutch, It's cool. He can die.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know. Like the whole thing about Dutch is like I just like want to pretend it's all a dream and she didn't get captured and everything's cool. But I have to admit that it's going to be like Eli Roth directed this episode.
Okay, well, you are someone who at one point told me that you saw a Saw movie on the opening night. So we all know where your tastes lie with regards to this.
When I was a teenager, the Saw movies were out. Yes. And I saw 6 of them opening night. Okay, well... 6 of the 7. So that is now on the record. I am going to just go and be a hermit forever.
This is... I feel like we need to give our listeners some time to recover from this information.
Everybody sit down, grab a brown bag, breathe heavily, don't hyperventilate.
I think you told me
I had bad taste.
You had?
Thanks. Thanks. Aren't you glad that Pacific Rim 2 got canceled indefinitely?
Guillermo del Toro is still working on it, thank you very much. Since this production has stopped filming, I'd appreciate you not bringing that up anymore.
So, Kyle, I understand that you might have a delightfully different take on this fan fiction than I do.
Oh, do I? Coming off the startling and life-changing success of the poem I read a few weeks ago, have decided to return to my love of creative writing that the strain has ignited inside me, and prepared a short story based on what I think will happen in this episode.
Okay.
Or rather, it's not so much what I think will happen, it's what would happen if the strain was... If the strain wasn't a TV show. If the strain was something that actually happened in the world.
Okay.
So we'll just start from there.
Okay.
And it is titled, The Rescue.
Ooh.
This is a terrible idea, Abraham Satrakian muttered, hobbling alongside his companions towards the hotel that Dutch was being held at. The old man had lived through the Holocaust and fought valiantly against the impossible odds created by the Strigoi invasion, having struck a near-fatal blow against the Master that would have restored the world to its rightful order. Alas, the Master had taken another body, and Satrakian feared that he could not match this new form in ferocity nor in leather jackets. And to compound matters, he was now saddled with being seemingly the only adult in the motley crew of outcasts tasked by fate with saving the world. Out of the corner of his eye, Satrakian spied Ephraim Goodweather taking a generous sip from the flask of alcohol that he no longer even attempted to conceal. These days, seldom was F more than a few feet away from a stiff drink, whether he was engaging in high-level spy games, insisting on pretending that he can operate a sniper rifle, or babysitting his demon child. If the vampires don't kill us, Abe stewed, that damn Zack surely will. How the hell did you find a 40-ounce of Mad Dog during the apocalypse? Abe barked cantankerously, unable to hold back the cantankerousness any longer. 7-Eleven, they're still delivering, F said, annoyed, taking another sip. Did 7-Eleven even deliver before the apocalypse? Abe practically shouted in reply. That's when Nora started crying. Any loud noise made her do so, and Abe instantly regretted raising his voice. How does one launch a surprise attack, he wondered, when a member of your team is weeping loudly and constantly? This was one of the many objections he raised prior to embarking on this rescue mission, only to be dismissively mocked by F and subsequently comforted, he thinks, by Fett, though it's impossible to tell with that one. Vasily Fett had clearly suffered some kind of head injury in a previous battle, though Abe was the only one who seemed to realize it. He had suddenly and inexplicably become obsessed with dynamite, his accent was changing by the hour, and he spoke in increasingly short and nonsensical bursts. Through trial and error, Satrakian had gleaned that meep meep now meant yes, garbled mumbling meant no, and boom boom meant that he was going to destroy the nearest structure with explosives. As they walked down the center of the cracked road, Abe couldn't shake the feeling that this was a terrible plan. This feeling came primarily from the fact that the plan, such as it was, consisted of, in F's words, muddling around for a secret entrance yada yada rescue the hot chick. Satrakian had asked him to explain what the yada yada part consisted of, but perhaps did so too harshly, because F had simply finished his vodka, stared at Abe briefly, and walked away. At this moment, Abe still had little sense of what exactly they were doing, though he resigned himself to making the most of it. Maybe a secret passage would present itself. Maybe they would find the exact room easily. Maybe it would be poorly fortified, and the vampires would continue their seemingly impossible streak of missing with their stingers at near point-blank range. Maybe, he thought, Icarus would be there and caught off guard by their entry, and Abe could end this decades-long battle once and for all. Things started off promisingly enough. Fett, charging ahead in a blind rage as he looked for a structural weakness in the building, stumbled upon a sewer grate. This would take them right inside, preferably to a room that was not infested by vampires, or so Abe hoped. Alas, they would not be so lucky. Emerging from the tunnel, the crew popped up in the middle of a room swarming with Strigoi. Icarus was nowhere to be found, but dozens of vampires immediately took notice of their presence. For his part, Abe took notice of the fact that none of his companions were formally nor informally trained in any form of weaponry, and briefly pondered the cosmic impossibility that they had all survived until this point. That would quickly change. A visibly drunk F staggered forward one step too far and promptly took a stinger to the neck. Nora, strangely, stopped crying for the first time in an hour, but resumed as she was swarmed by vampires. Swinging his sword wildly and making his way to a corner of the room, Abe's concentration was only broken by the maniacal, accented bellowing of a madman, whom Abe quickly identified as Fett. Boom, boom, he heard. Abraham Satrakian could do little but bark no, as the entire building was engulfed by a flash of light, followed by a devastating explosion that decimated the better part of the block. Lying on the ground, Abraham's dying thoughts were of the most important things in his life. His late wife, his pursuit of the Oxidolumen, and the cruel god that sent him these buffoons to assist in saving the world. If only, Abe pondered, as his eyes closed for the last time, if only I didn't screw things up with Quinlan. Thank you very much.
Kyle! That was amazing!
Thank you!
Also, apparently you hate everybody!
I killed them all.
You based them off of their bingo card
You know what? I'm following the Walking Dead school of I need a new cast. Let's bring in some actors from The Wire. Marlo's getting lonely. And I'm ready. I'm ready for some new characters. So I killed all. I took my one opportunity to kill all the ones we have now.
Well, not all of them. You left Gus and Angel. You left Quinlan.
Correct.
You left Nikki.
Oh, she dies implicitly.
But she proved her job. She killed somebody.
She doesn't exist in my version of the show.
Yes, and you kept Cream, as you said.
Yeah, of course Marlo's still there. Also, Duchess killed implicitly. Also.
Yes, well, she was in the building.
She was long. The cruel irony is that she was long dead in my version of the fanfiction. Icarus is long left.
Oh, so Icarus survived.
Oh yeah, Icarus wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
It was just a bunch of raided vampires and then our main cast.
Well, I appreciate that, Kyle. You did quite some wonderful work. You're a great writer.
Oh, thank you.
By the way, creative writer. I've read much of your non-creative writing.
I hope so. I mean, we've been working together for like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Okay. Well, thank you, buddy, for staying tuned with our fanfiction. Please feel free to send us your fanfiction at thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. That's thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. We might pick the best one and read it on air.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for our coverage of Season 2, Episode 11, Dead End, again, which was written by Carlton Cuse and Regina Corrado. And throughout the podcast, we will be referencing our fanfiction, and we will see how accurate we were. Something tells me that up to a point, Kyle's version might actually be a little bit true.
Ooh, very excited for that.
Not the boom boom part, but...
No? You mean Fett doesn't destroy everyone with the ill-timed explosion?
No.
Darn it. Well,
by the way, I think we should just start calling Zach Demon Child.
Yeah, oh yeah. I've already started that in my own, thought life. So now we take you, the listener, to the future.
Just Sunday night.
One day.
Thank you again for listening, and listen for our thoughts on Dead End.
Whoa!
Look at that!
It's the future!
Sunday!
Rocket cars are in the sky!
Double rainbows!
double rainbows! We are now living in the future.
Yes. Welcome everybody back to our regularly scheduled programming. It is Sunday, and you have just listened to our fan fiction. But now, Kyle and I will be discussing Season 2, Episode 11, Dead End, the actual events that transpired in Dead End. We hope that you enjoyed that fan fiction, but now on to the real thing.
Look, if you're still listening, congratulations. And thank you.
You're a superhero.
You're a superhero.
You get a certificate that says you're a superhero if you just listen to our fan fiction.
Yeah.
Certified Strigoi Hunter. That's what
we'll Photoshop you something.
Oh, please. There are over 6,000 of you, so I really hope not.
Well,
all right.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Kyle, what did you think of Dead End?
Wow. I mean, this is a tough one. There are a lot of elements of this episode that I really hated, but there were some things about this episode that I thought The Strain did better than it's ever done before. Ooh. And I have very conflicted feelings about where I'm actually going to come down on the episode, because I think this was the best horror movie The Strain has ever done. And this is supposed to be a show that is scary, and I have said on the podcast many times, I do not think this show is scary. Mm-hmm. And this was, at times, the most effective, I think by far, I think by a mile, the most effective The Strain has ever been. In terms of, like, not just, like, single moments, or single, like, cool effects, or like, visual cues, but, like, as an actual, like, horror movie, I don't think The Strain has ever come anywhere close to this. In terms of effectiveness, but that might just be to my own particular tastes. Having said that, there were some things in this episode that were so polar opposite to my tastes that I can't even stomach to think about them. And so I'm really torn on this one, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to talk it through.
Yeah, I would say that I too am torn, but maybe for slightly different reasons. I think that you are right and wrong. About the horror movie thing.
Okay.
I think that you're right in my fan fiction way, in that this was a very special episode of Hostel.
It was. You called that.
I called that a very special episode of Hostel. But I don't know that I thought it was a unique horror. It wasn't unique in its horror, I guess. Except for one very specific way that it was very unique. Stinger attempted rape.
I think certainly not unique in the context of horror, but in the context of The Strain, a show that lives on cliches to the point that we effectively made a bingo card for it, where like half the card gets checked off every week. Half the card was not checked off this week, and the way the horror was directed, I thought, was much more interesting and shot, and just everything about these sort of technical elements, like whether they were good or not, were much different than the sort of very vanilla way that The Strain normally does it. And again, like, the horror on this show almost always boils down to, like, oh, vampire attack.
Right.
And that was not this. Like, I have a very hard time thinking of a horror scene from The Strain that was not vampire attack !
Right.
And this was not that. And so that's what I liked.
This was, I would say, genuinely scary on a lot of different fronts.
Sure.
And I would like to just offer to our audiences, because this is how I like to do things, that we will be discussing some sexual violence in this episode. Yeah. So if you didn't watch the episode and you're listening to our podcast,
oh my gosh,
and that makes you uncomfortable, please stop listening right now.
So, I mean, if you got through the eepisode, you're going to be fine on the podcast, but if you didn't, oh no.
Yeah, just a warning, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
So it was a very I'm trying to find the words for it.
I mean, should we talk about the sexual violence up front? Because that was clearly, like, the thing in this episode that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, that was the most interesting way I've ever seen most interesting way I've ever seen monster sexual violence.
I think interesting is a far too generous choice of words. And I know you are not intending to be generous, but I think you are accidentally being generous here. Because
I think it was pretty distasteful, is what I really feel.
I think you could take off pretty. This was a straight up distasteful scene, and it was not. There's no need to equivocate with this. This was. I mean, the fact that they didn't go through with it, I guess, is a positive
bonus.
Yeah, I mean, no,
bonus points.
Would have went to a whole different level. But first of all, Icarus is I mean, obviously he's not motivated by like sexual desire. He's motivated because he wants to humiliate Dutch.
Wait, which is what sexual assault generally
right.
But it's to be in control. It's not necessarily to get off.
Yeah, but there's not even the auspices of that. This is clearly a scene he's designed it to be humiliating her. The question of why is the big one here. Like because it's not that sexual violence can't be used, and I know you make this point a lot, and it's important to stress that it's not that sexual violence is automatically something that shouldn't be on TV.
No, it certainly should be portrayed.
Yes,
because it's a real thing that does happen, but it needs to be portrayed the right way.
And it shouldn't be portrayed on the strain.
No.
Because this is not a show that's equipped to deal with something, and frankly, it's not a show that needs to engage with that. And this is a prime example here, because I don't know what that added to this episode in terms of anything.
There was no history of Icarus being that way, is the thing that I thought. Like, I thought, oh, we're getting these flashbacks, which, by the way, I was very pro getting some flashbacks about Icarus. But, like, I thought, oh, we're getting these flashbacks to find out that he was this terrible rapist. Like, that's where I thought we're gonna go back to back on rape, like in the episode of Orange is the New Black. Yeah. But, like, instead, it was pretty much nothing at all in the flashback that really mattered. Like, there was good character build-up, but nothing pertaining to his chase of Dutch. You know, like, they were supposed to be associated, but there really was... I didn't... Like, because they smelled the same, but there wasn't...
Well, they were both blonde. They were both blonde. They looked similar.
That was strong jaws, I get that. But, like...
They both look like supermodels.
Right, exactly. But there wasn't any... otherwise wasn't any similarities between those two stories, so there was all that build-up for nothing.
Oh, well, first of all, I thought the flashbacks on their own merits were just fine.
Oh, I agree.
I think... honestly, like, if you removed the threat of sexual violence from that story, I don't think it would have taken anything away, except that really sort of queasy, awkward feeling that you get when a show that is not equipped to engage with this stuff is using it pretty much, I would say, to arouse the audience. And that's what I found upsetting, is that I think the threat of sexual violence here, in a very veiled way that the show would never admit to, was being used to attract male viewers. Like, yeah. I think the intention here, the surface intention, was to make it more scary or whatever, but that's BS.
To put a character in danger, that's the surface intention.
She was in danger. Like, that's the thing, is there was nothing about her situation that wasn't dangerous, and it had been very clearly conveyed, and we had spent a lot of time with her, and there was no question about what Icarus' intentions were. Like, it was not a question of whether he would, like, torture and kill her. That was what his intentions were. We knew that without that scene. So having her take off her pants, and, like, you know, just sort of very slowly, and then him asking her to, like, bend over, and things like that is... I don't care what the show would vehemently deny this, but they're lying. Is that they're doing that because it's a largely male audience and they want to, arouse male viewers. Like that's what that material is for, and that's what's so distasteful. Is that there's no functional purpose show wise for him to be putting her in that situation. And so I mean it's really one of the like in an era of television where we're more sensitive to this stuff than ever. This is one of the most glaring examples of rape being used as a means of making men ogling a character, and that's what was so distasteful. And
making more people tune in with the threat of it. I mean, they were very overtly putting it in the ads, and that was like the thing. They were showing her bent over with her pants off in the ads. You know, that pulls people in. They're like, oh, what's going to happen?
Right.
But no, I 100% agree with you that, and it was, I venture not to say this in the wrong way. But you know, sexual humiliation is kind of like a big thing that people are talking about right now. 50 Shades of Grey is really popular, all that stuff. So, you know, it's almost like, in the very disturbing way, monetizing off of that by pulling off of this very popular genre of I wouldn't call it romance, but you know, sex in pop culture. But instead of it letting it be a consensual moment, it's a non-consensual moment, which could, you know, again, is a might or might not be appealing to certain male audience viewers.
Well, first of all, as people on Twitter noted, this was 50 Shades of Ikehurst, to put a point on that. But also, this wasn't an inherently sexual situation.
No.
Is that we had seen Ikehurst with a guy chained up, and the scene was very scary, and he eventually killed him. Right. And the idea of Ikehurst is not a sexual character, because as Dutch points out, he doesn't have sexual organs.
Right.
And so there was no need to inject that. Like this was only a sexual situation because Dutch is a beautiful woman.
Yes.
And if it was Nora who had been caught, who, by the way, is very attractive but not sexualized on the show the way that Dutch is, I feel like this scene would have played out without any of that, and no one would have thought it was missing.
Well, this was a point that I made on Twitter earlier this week, was that I felt like Dutch in the last episode, she said a lot of stuff about like monogamy is an arbitrary punishing rule, and that now she is being punished for her lack of monogamy. Exactly. That is not, she's not being punished by Ikehurst, because there's no way that Ikehurst would know that about her. She is being punished by the writers for being a sexual female character in pop culture. 100%
correct. That's it. That's the unspoken morality of the show, which is that she is being judged for her choices, and for her, and frankly for her quote unquote betrayal of Fett, is that she wronged him in the minds of the show. And so now this is her payback, and he comes to rescue her at the end, and that sort of resolves the whole situation. Like she had to, it was like walking through fire. She had to walk over these coals to atone for her sins, and then Prince Charming came and rescued her.
Yeah, and that's pretty despicable.
It is. It's really like that's the sort of disgusting aspect of this episode, and it shouldn't be like glazed over.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate because it was so easy to avoid. It was so easy not to sexualize this, and I thought they did a really good job with the non-sexualized stuff, and I don't understand why they felt I do understand, sadly, but I wish that they had more balls.
Yes.
Like that's the thing. Like I wish the writers of the strain could have just like manned up, honestly, and written this without feeling the need to go in that direction, because there was nothing about the Ikehurst character that needed to go in that direction, and it was just the show giving in to its baser instincts.
Yes, and again, for our listeners who don't know, I have read all the books, and Kyle reads them at the end of every season. And in the books, sexual violence is a thing that that we have to be aware of, and that is sort of put onto one of our female characters. But it's done on human-to-human violence, which is something that makes a lot of sense in like a time when people are all clamoring for power, and like what is sexual violence? It's power. It's proof of power. It's humiliation. And it's and I never want to call that tasteful, but it's more tasteful. Like to have a human engage in a human in that way, and I think that's something. I haven't ever finished The Walking Dead, but that's something that The Walking Dead, to my knowledge, does pretty successfully, is, realizing that the humans are the ones who are really scary in a lot of these types of situations. It's not actually the monsters that are scary in these situations. Right. And I just flat out, there's no reason for a monster to do that in this story. There are stories where that happens, but this is not one of those stories, and it was really terrible. It was just awful writing. I'm having a hard time being eloquent about this because it made me really angry. Not in a female scorned way, but in a this is just inappropriately injected into this story.
Yeah, that was the problem. And it's just we don't need to go on any further about that. I mean, I think our thoughts are pretty clear on it. But that was definitely a very bold mark against this episode. Again, an episode, and the show, but also I didn't, I've had other issues with the way that I think the way that women are portrayed on the strain is a long-standing topic of discussion among us and others. So this is sort of in line with what the show, sadly predictable based on the show's history.
But I did have one final note about that I thought was really interesting. Just on the part of FX, I'm not sure exactly how viewer discretion works. I don't know if that is the network that does it or the television show that does it, or just some arbitrary committee that watches the episode and says, oh yes, you got to put that discretion on. But I thought it was very interesting that a lesbian kissing scene got sexual situations in the viewer discretion warning at the head of the episode, but attempted rape did not get sexual situations in the viewer discretion. I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was pretty bad.
Or the fact that Dutch was pantsless for literally 3/4 of this episode.
Yes.
No sexual situations warning.
No sexual situations because she's not kissing a lady. She's just being a lady.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, to lighten the mood, I have a funny joke.
Oh, let's hear it, please.
I guess for Eichhorst, Pineapple and Schnapps is the Nazi vampire version of Netflix and Chill.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. We're back. We're back. Eichhorst and his pineapples.
What is that?
This is what worked for me. Because it was utterly unclear whether that was intentionally funny or unintentionally funny, but it was funny. And Eichhorst saying, like, eat your pineapple. Like, what is happening? Like, that's the kind of weirdness that I really respond to. And again, I don't know if the strain was trying to be silly or what, but he was so committed to making her eat the pineapple. And it also, because he's such a great actor and the scene was very scary and, with the collar around her neck and everything. And it did have a certain level of menace to it.
Yes.
That I liked, even though it was so ridiculous. Like, it was just a real, like, fun / scary thing, and he was so committed to it that I was laughing. And that's the part I really liked. I loved all the pineapple business, even though I have no idea what the idea was behind it.
I could have done a whole episode of him doing weird horror things like that. Like that, because that was weird, and it was funny, but it was also really scary. Like, he got really menacing and forced her to eat the pineapple. That kind of stuff. That's the kind of torture stuff that I think Eichhorst could be well utilized for, because that's a way to employ his Nazi background, right? Like, to break people's will, and you break people's will in lots of different ways, and that includes forcing them to eat or forcing them not to eat.
Right.
But I noticed you put this on Twitter, but he's very Hannibal Lecter, like a la Brian Fuller's Hannibal Lecter in this episode.
Yes. Oh, well, there was a scene where he was very lovingly preparing the pineapple while classical music played, and it was the most Hannibal that the strain has ever been. It was even more Hannibal than those scenes where he puts on makeup, or like he put the makeup on Kelly, where the classical music is playing. But that's a very Hannibal move, the food preparation with classical music. Except in this case, the food wasn't people, so not quite all Hannibal.
That's fair. I thought it was also very interesting, though, that I thought that the camera work surrounding Eichhorst when he was in his hotel room also felt very Hannibal to me. I thought that this episode was cinematically very interesting and very good horror cinematography. That's what we were just talking about.
That's what I was saying in the intro. Is that the way that this was shot and edited was, I think, again, even if it was like a poor man's Hannibal is the best show ever at that. And so, if you're just, it was a passable imitation, and that is still good. Like that is the things that this episode attempted in that respect with just the way he was shot and the way the Dutch's escape, where it was very like manic, and it felt like she was very panicked, and the everything about the scenes felt that way. All of that I thought was very effective in this episode.
Cat and mouse aspect of all of it. Yeah, I mean, and it was classic, female running from male bad guy, all that stuff. But it was still, that part was very, very engaging, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Yes.
But by, taking off his face a little bit with the pepper spray, and the way that he walks with his shoulders back very gallantly as he's just like slowly walking toward her, because he knows that she has a dead end, which appropriately named episode.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the titular dead ends I thought were also really cool, because that was like almost a fantastical element, like seeing like doorways with bricks in them. I don't know. It's just very, very like kind of out there. It's not something that I think in real life would necessarily happen. Like this hotel, would it be like bricked up doors? Like, I don't know, maybe. But either way, it like the way it was all shot, it felt like a fever dream, a fever nightmare. And her running into these walls like felt very dreamlike to me.
Yes.
And that was something I really enjoyed about this. The whole chase was really good.
the art design in it, just the development of the way, like, even though I didn't like the fact that she was pantless, but the way that, she's shoeless and pantless and she's helpless and running around and in this kind of creepy old hotel. Yeah, it was very, 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 very effective. And the camera work and lighting just kind of helped with that even more. And I thought her performance was really great.
She was great. Her name, I'm going to get it wrong, but is Ruta Gedmintes? Yeah,
Ruta Gedmintes.
And I to be honest, we podcasted about every episode. I never bothered learning her name, just because she was kind of a nothing character that in the first season neither of us liked. But she was great in this episode.
Yeah.
And I thought she sold everything. I thought she didn't get run over by Richard Sammel in the one-on-one scenes, which I was really worried about. I thought that was going to be like one of those situations where it's two actors and one of them is just running circles around the other one.
Right.
But and she was written in such a way that like she sort of gave back some of when she commented at the beginning of the flashbacks that he became a Nazi because he couldn't get laid. I thought was a really good line.
Mm-hmm. And I hope you choke on me.
Yes. Yeah. like she was. Again, if you take away the sexual violence, it's about as good of a damsel in distress story as you're going to get. Yeah. She was really, I felt like, empowered in a lot of ways, and very resourceful. The fact that she got herself out of the traps and escaped on her own. And
that's a good point. Damsels in distress very rarely do that.
Yes, right. The rescue was after she escaped and ran into the brick walls. But the rescue, she did manage to get herself out of the initial situation and inflict some damage on him, which I thought was a nice nod to her sort of not just being a helpless woman in the situation.
Well, and being defiant the whole time. She wasn't cowering and whimpering the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. She obeyed orders to get herself to the next moment, just to keep it going. Not ever to break. She was never broken. Her will was never broken, even when, he's dragging her up the stairs. She was still screaming like hell. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, that was one of my favorite things, because I feel like often when the damsel in distress gets caught or the female gets caught, whatever, she also is always screaming, but she's screaming in pure terror. She's like crying and screaming, but instead Dutch is just kicking and screaming like, "You're not going to take me alive!"
Right. Right.
It's just I've really grown an affection for Dutch because she's so defiantly herself, and at first I found that really annoying. But honestly, I think that's because they just didn't know how to write her.
They rewrote the character this year.
They rewrote. Well, they didn't entirely rewrite her. I would say that those characteristics were always there. They just found a way to make them likable.
Yeah. Maybe they refocused the character.
Yeah.
That, they took... Because she was such a plot device in the first season. Most of her scenes were about hacking.
Yes.
And so we really didn't get a chance to get to know her. So I think this season they've abandoned the hacking part. Mm-hmm. And so now her scenes are more about who she is. And I think they've been deployed with varying levels of success. But here, I think it all sort of came together. And for me, this is probably my turning point on Dutch, where I actually like the character now.
Wait, isn't that very interesting? Like, this terrible, terrible thing happens to her, and it actually makes her significantly more likable. And not in a, like, oh, she deserves our sympathy way, but in a, wow, she really fought valiantly way.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly why. Is that the way that she fought against it, and her cleverness at getting out of the situation. And I thought, for however cliche it was, I thought the moment where Fett does end up rescuing her and she's in his arms and all that, I thought that was a reasonably well done emotional payoff for the whole thing. Just those two together, and I don't know, maybe I'm a sap, but yeah.
No, that was no, I totally agree, but I think that when he shows up and tosses the silver grenade, I thought that was. Weirdly, the way the grenade went off was kind of the biggest disappointment of the entire episode, because it just kind of went poof, and then Icarus was gone. And I really wanted to say, like, I'm looking at you, Regina Corrado, because you keep giving us these really exciting episodes that end with nothing.
Yeah, we got to get to this now. I was actually going to be much more positive on this episode, because up until the very end, I was holding out hope that Nikki would arrive and get killed.
Yeah.
Because how do you have this episode without Nikki being present? If you're going to take the time to reintroduce that stupid character, how can she not be in this episode?
How do she and Fett not have to join forces to go after the person that they love?
The easiest possible decision to make. The easiest! It could not have been more easy. And somehow she's not in this episode. Like, why does that character exist? Honestly, is the Strange so afraid to kill characters that it won't even, take the most minor, obnoxious, meaningless character and kill her to punctuate an otherwise pretty exciting episode? This is now a real problem that we have now. It's like 6 straight weeks now where we have this imminent, immediate danger, and Icarus just runs away. Silver grenade, run away, no chase.
No, nope. It's didn't even try to fight for his victim. Usually baddies, that's what they do, you know? It's this is mine.
Right, there was no fight.
Yeah, he gave up.
He gave up. There was nothing. And it would be one thing if it was the first time, but this is every episode. It happens with Kelly. It happens with Icarus. Every episode, there is a conflict that ends with one character running away. And there is no chase, and there is no continuing action. The next episode, it's a completely separate event. Well, that's a problem.
Because, even if they didn't have Nikki, another thing that you could have done is leave all of the characters stuck in the hotel and not being able to figure out their way out because he knows every corridor. Even if they played it and more cat and mouse where he's hunting all of them and they accidentally get separated or something like that, there's a lot of ways to have continued that or to have not just made him just impotently run away.
Yes.
There's so many interesting things that could have been done there.
Yeah, The Strain is only a serial drama to the extent that a sitcom is serial because the characters have arcs. This is one of the most episodic television shows I've ever seen. That wasn't episodic. That wasn't just Big Bang Theory or something. This is about on that level in terms of continuing action. Because it's we have the battle for Red Hook, right? What happened after that? Nothing. Not mentioned again. It's we have this event. They're in this hotel. It's this crazy thing. I assume Dutch is going to be carrying these scars going forward. But in terms of the actual action on the show, it's not like this hotel is ever going to come back. It's we just walked out of the set and now next week completely new adventure.
Yep.
I really don't understand the strange storytelling choices. Yeah.
So do you want to get even more mad?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm riled up.
About storytelling choices? Yeah. So who is babysitting Zach this whole time?
Oh, trust me. I had long discussions on Twitter about this. Because last week, everyone was out of the house. Zach was home alone that entire episode, and again it happened. There is nobody back at the base.
There's nobody with Zach.
Nobody.
Unless it's Nikki. If they come back and it's Nikki, I'm going to laugh really
It has to be Nikki. So Nikki, this person who stole Dutch's money and threw her laptop into the ocean, and who was probably working for the Master, based on probably in terms of what the characters should understand, based on what we know about the Strange, she probably isn't, because this show has no subtext. But why would, babysitting Zach has been an enormous plot point throughout this show. Nora and F have had 10 conversations about who babysits Zach. And these last 2 episodes, he has been a non-factor. Everyone has left, non-factor.
Non-factor. Nobody to babysit him.
F did not even so much as bring up his name.
Nope.
Yeah.
Oh, it was pretty bad.
Can we also talk about the B story of this episode, which was the oxidolumin?
Was that the B story or the C story? I thought Angel and Gus was the B story.
I guess. I guess it was sort of the first half side story and the second half side story. Well, Angel and Gus I thought was a little bit better. The oxidolumin continues to be just confounding.
It's very strange.
I mean, really now. This is a real side quest.
Yeah, little Italian boy grows up. He's got the book. He's clearly not very bright, but he's clever enough to keep the book by his side. And he has a fight with the guy who he had a good relationship with when he was a kid, who he ties up. And then And he goes and he sells the book to Cream, which, hey, you know what? I could use more cream in my life, so that's fine. But, like...
Why do I care about this character, this book guy? Like, why is
Cream
he...
or Rudyard?
No, Rudyard. Why does he matter? And also, when did Cream take over an island? I commented on Twitter, like, he is now, like, living, like, as a Mad Max-style warlord. Like, he has, like, a war band. I assume he has some kind of giant war machine, like a converted semi that he's, like, crossing, like, Long Island with or whatever. But, like, I feel like Cream's story, it would be much more interesting than the story that we've seen, because I want to know what his rise to power was.
Well, when you read the books, you'll read all about that.
Okay, good. Because wasn't he, like, or probably 4 episodes ago, like, living in, like, an underground bunker?
Yeah, surrounded by books.
Yeah, so now he's taken over an island, and he's, like, living in, like, the governor's mansion. I do not understand what went on with Cream these last 4 days.
No, in the books they describe, and I think this is fine to say.
Yeah.
In the books, he's sort of described as the guy who can get anything, and that's what he does. He, like, runs the black market.
Yeah, but now he's, like, the governor.
Right, but he went very quickly from being, like, a book peddler and, like, a car stealer to the governor.
He was a petty criminal.
Yes.
Up until four episodes ago, which I think in Strain Time is like 4 days ago.
Right.
And so suddenly he is now the most powerful figure in the apocalypse. I do not understand. And it was like completely uncommented upon. Like he has like an army guarding him now.
Yeah.
Like the first time that the book came up, like you could just like walk into his bunker. So I don't understand that. But like on the Gus and Angel stuff, I thought that was pretty good, right?
Yeah, no. I could use more Gus and Angel in my life.
Me too.
I was like super sad for a second because I thought that Angel was going to be introduced and then he was going to be sent off with the Indian family, never to be heard from again.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, that is not the way to utilize that character.
That would have been horrible.
Because that character is utilized so well in the books. Why would you do that? Yeah, no, but I'm glad, good for Gus that he got with his lady. They consummated their relationship. High five to him. But then I'm actually really glad for that part of the plot to be done because it's been dragging and dragging and dragging. And I understand that like they needed to introduce Angel some way, but there are lots of other ways that they could have introduced him that didn't involve this random Indian family who's delivering food in the apocalypse.
Now that they did consummate their relationship and Anya has ridden off into the sunset, I think the odds that Anya dies in horrible fashion are between 99 and 100%.
Yes.
Because as we've seen with Dutch, if you have anything but the most traditional of sexual histories, and you're a woman, you're in trouble on this show. And so I feel like that night that they spent together was her signing her death warrant.
Yes. Oh, interestingly, though, Nora's been pretty safe. Her mom died. She had to kill her mom, so that's not necessarily safe for sleeping with a married man. But
yeah, I think F is married only in the loosest sense.
Right, but then he was with Lee, and Lee was immediately killed. Women really aren't supposed to have sex in the show.
If a woman has sex on the show, she is done.
Wow.
Which I guess it does make it a horror movie.
Yeah, I guess we're in the 80s, man.
Yeah. Yeah, classic horror.
Classic horror. I'm trying to remember, was there anything else about this episode, or was that pretty much...
I mean, it was really the Dutch and Eichhorst episode, and
yeah.
That was fine. We got a solid moment of boom boom.
We got boom boom.
Got boom boom, as predicted in my fan fiction. Yes. It was not to the extent that my fan fiction described, which I was disappointed by, but I'll have to accept it. So Fett was the knight in shining armor. He, F, and Nora all parked their personalities by the side of the road for this episode and just became generic heroes to rescue the damsel in distress, which is like a necessity because there wasn't screen time, although I would argue that if you got rid of all the Oxydo Lumen stuff, there would have been screen time for them to behave like themselves, rather than just sort of hero drones. But okay, whatever. Like, I'll take it. That's not like any kind of TV faux pas. It's pretty normal. So
yeah. I don't actually know if Nora said anything in this episode.
No, did not speak.
I don't think, granted, I was tweeting most of the time, and I usually watch the episode twice, but tonight I decided I did not want to watch attempted vampire rape again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't recall Nora speaking at all in this episode. I know F spoke because he's Corey Stoll, and they wouldn't put him in the screen unless he was speaking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
No, yeah, it was a weird episode of ups and downs. It followed a lot of tropes and a lot of cliches, but you know what? Hey, that's what horror stuff does.
Yes, what's really funny is this was a controversial episode, or a dividing episode, because I saw a lot of people on Twitter say this was the best episode the show has done. And I can actually see that. Because, again, the elements of this episode that I really liked. And I think that if you are watching The Strain as a horror movie, and you are not sensitive to the stuff that you and I are sensitive about, I could totally see the case that this was the best episode the show has done. I think honestly this was the scariest episode the show has done, and I think this had some of the most interesting cinematography, and like the best chase scene. Like there was a lot of things about this episode that were, as far as The Strain goes, top notch. But then we got a email from our friend Paul Clark, who the guy who works with the CDC, who was an awesome guest on our podcast.
Our pandemic specialist.
Our pandemic specialist, who I declared this to be possibly the worst episode the series has ever done. And gave us a detailed and scarily accurate list of all the things that were wrong with it. So really we covered all on the spectrum here. Like every opinion you could have about this episode, someone has.
Well, and that's probably the hallmark of it doing something right, I would think.
And wrong.
And wrong.
Yeah, it was, I guess, big picture, zooming out, what this episode really did right is that it wasn't boring. It wasn't a down-the-middle episode that didn't get people riled up. You know, whether you loved it or hated it, you probably loved it or hated it. You know, it wasn't like an episode that you could sort of be okay about.
But yeah. So I guess I'm the thing that I keep focusing on, and I feel terribly about what I'm about to say, but it's like I've been noticing, I've been starting to see patterns in the writers for each episode.
Yeah.
And this is an episode that kind of solidified for me that Regina Corrado is all hype and all excitement whenever she writes an episode, because that's what, Battle of Red Hook was too. She's written other episodes that were super exciting that all fall flat by the end. And it kind of when I read that yesterday when we were doing our fanfic, I was like, oh man, that's going to end on a lull.
Yeah. Although I would hesitate to blame her, because I feel like character deaths are what is really being called out for here.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the writer of the episode is in charge of that. I think that is a big picture showrunner decision. Whether I don't think a writer has the power to take it upon themselves to kill off a character. I think that is I would blame Carlton Cuse for that.
Right. That's fair.
Or possibly FX, if they're being noted, because I know like with Dexter and Showtime shows, they're specifically told not to kill characters. That's like something that the showrunners confirmed. And so FX seems like one of the coolest networks. It seems hard for me to believe that they would be the ones instigating this, but I think that these decisions are being made at a level much higher than the episode writer. And that's really, like, it's ending on a lull because nothing is happening. Right. And that would be, and like, if you want to put characters in these high-intensity situations, bodies have to start piling up. Right. Like, we can't have these episodes where no one dies if everyone is in imminent danger. You can't have it. And
it's very interesting because the mutual favorite episode of you and myself is Creatures of the Night, which is an episode where a main character does die.
Jim dies.
Where Jim dies, where a protagonist is actually killed off. And I think to date, that is the only time that has happened.
Yes, and if he had not died, that episode would not be our favorite. That's the thing, is that we would be speaking about it this more positively than the Battle for Red Hook, because that was a better episode. But what legitimized that episode is his death. And I feel like with what the Strain is going for now, with these big set piece episodes, you've got to legitimize it either with a character death or with continuing action to the following week.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's like if the show doesn't want to kill off characters, that's fine, but we need there to be real consequence and not abstract emotional consequence, because this is the apocalypse. This isn't Mad Men. Just because Peggy goes through a traumatic experience and it affects her in future episodes, that works for Mad Men. It does not work for The Strain. This is a show about vampires and the world ending. We need real, tangible consequence to these episodes. And so, next week we're going to start and everyone's going to be back at base and Zach will be okay and everything will be fine and Dutch will be a little bit sad and we'll move on. That's not an okay ending to an episode like this.
No.
We need real ramifications. And it's just the Strain doesn't get that. And that's, I think, one of the show's, along with the way that it writes women, that's one of the show's biggest fundamental recurring problems, is that it doesn't understand how important consequences are. And that's what, to me, is why, like, an episode like this is never going to be one of my best episodes of the show. Even though I know some people on Twitter really liked it. Like, that's why, is that the consequences aren't there.
I agree. Although, as you were just saying all of that, I just realized that The Strain is the complete antithesis of True Blood, because True Blood was a vampire show where vampires were sexy. Sorry, I'm just thinking like
glittery.
Glittery. Whereas, in The Strain, vampires are monsters, which is what I think is much more interesting. But in True Blood, every single episode ended on a cliffhanger in the middle of action. So you were always ending at the beginning of the next episode.
Yes.
Constantly going. You were being barraged with it. And it was just an emotional up and down all the time. Whereas The Strain is like, open and close, open and close, open and close. Yes. There's no follow-through.
Yeah, right. Everything is like an episode of Scooby-Doo. They get in a van, they tackle a case, they solve it, and then next episode, reset.
Yes.
That's The Strain. This is a Scooby-Doo show. I think True Blood is a great example of something I talked about last week, which is the importance of pace. Because True Blood was actually, like, either, like, it was kind of bad good for, like, 3 seasons, and then it was just bad. But that show was always very, very bad. But it was carried by this pacing, which is what you're talking about, where it was so much fun that you sort of overlooked the elements of the show that, like, the just horrible acting and storytelling that was nonsense and all of that. But all of that gets swept under the rug because the show was so brilliantly paced. And not just the episodes, but the seasons were brilliantly paced. And that's what The Strain is missing. This episode was well paced, and last week's episode was well paced. But the season storytelling is so choppy, and so stop and start, and so, like, we need to reset after every episode. And that's where The Strain fails, is that season storytelling. Like, the Abe story has been stuck in neutral for, like, 9 episodes now.
All he does is yell.
All he does is yell and bark and go after this dumb book. And the F and Nora and Fed stories are like episodic adventures that have no bearing on one another. And there's no serial story this season. It's just the sort of general apocalypse.
Right.
Like, which is like the backdrop. Like, the backdrop is the only serialized element of this show. And that's really strange. It's just a really strange way to do your show.
It's a big problem.
Yeah, right. Which I think can be summarized as, this show is incompetent. It's an incompetent television show. Like, it's not that it doesn't do things well. It does a lot of things well. Has a lot of great moments. But, like, from a show-running perspective, this show is incompetent. And I don't know if it's gotten more competent since the first season, but I'd like to think so, because I hope at some point in its 4 or 5 season run, it gets there and figures out what it's doing. But it's like, bottom line, like, we can talk around it, but it's not a competent television show. And that's gonna hold it back.
Yeah.
That's gonna hold it back.
It doesn't know how to connect its pieces.
Yeah, it just can't get through storytelling. It can't get through plotting. It can't make consistent character choices. It doesn't know how to make things interesting that should be interesting. It doesn't know how to punctuate really good things that it does to legitimize them. Like, it just doesn't. It has a lot of good ideas that it doesn't know how to execute, and that's sort of the hallmark of a television show that's being run incompetently. And that's how I would describe The Strain. And I say that having liked a lot of this episode.
And a lot of this season.
Yeah, a lot of this season, because there's so much good stuff going on, and it's like there's a lot of pieces that would really work, but they just don't know how to put them. It's like they have a 10-piece puzzle, and they keep trying to put a corner piece in the center. Like, it's like, come on, guys! You're so close!
So close!
This isn't as hard as you're making it look. It's 10 pieces. The box is right there. It has a picture of the puzzle. You know how to make this work. Just, come on.
Just stop making Icarus run away.
Stop making Icarus run away.
That's what that puzzle piece is, by the way.
It's Icarus running.
It's running. Oh, goodness.
All right. I feel like we've said all that needs to be said.
I do too. Well, all right. This wraps up our 26th episode of the Strain podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our podcasts at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to the show and also rate us. Follow the show on Twitter at @TheStrainPod and Kyle and I at @KyleLovesTV and @BlaireLovesTV. Send us fan mail at thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, that's thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, tvbinges.com, to find and join our monthly binges and create your own. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.